Alright Reddit, buckle up because this is going to be a long one. I've been sitting on this story for a while, but after what went down last week, I need to get this off my chest. Fair warning, this isn't some feel-good family reconciliation story. This is about karma finally catching up to people who deserve it. I, 28M, have spent the last 12 years of my life working construction. Started from the absolute bottom, we're talking pushing wheelbarrows full of concrete in 95-degree heat, hauling lumber up 3 flights of stairs kind of bottom. Now I run my own crews as a site supervisor, but you'll need to understand where I came from because that's what makes all of this so messed up. Growing up in our house was like living in some twisted parallel universe where I was basically a ghost while my younger sister Madison was treated like she discovered the cure for cancer every time she learned a new dance move. I'm not even exaggerating here. Our house looked like some kind of Madison shrine. Every wall, every shelf, every flat surface had some trophy, certificate, or photo of her achievements. Ballet recitals, piano competitions, spelling bee participation awards, you name it, it was displayed like a precious artifact in a museum. Me? I had exactly one photo in the house. One. It was from my high school graduation, tucked away in some dusty album that probably hasn't seen daylight since Obama's first term. And it's not like I was some deadbeat kid. I lettered in football and wrestling, maintained a solid B+ average while working part-time, never got in trouble with the law. But in my parents' eyes, that was just expected. No praise, no celebration, just a nod and maybe a good job if they were feeling particularly generous that day. I started hitting the weights hard in sophomore year, partly because of football, but mostly because I needed somewhere to put all that anger. The gym became my sanctuary. While Madison was getting private piano lessons and dance tutorials, I was in our garage with a rusty bench press and some second-hand dumbbells I bought with my own money from mowing lawns. My old man never once spotted me. Never showed any interest in what I was doing, he was too busy videotaping Madison's dance performances or whatever. You know what really gets me? I can count on one hand the number of times my parents showed up to my wrestling matches. 3 out of 4 years of varsity competition. They always had some excuse. Madison has a recital, Madison has a competition, Madison needs help with her homework. I won the state championship in my weight class senior year. Neither of them was there. Why? Madison had an audition for some summer dance program she ended up quitting after 2 weeks anyway. By the time I hit 16, I was already working construction during summer breaks. Not because we had to, we weren't poor or anything. My old man had some cushy office job in management, and mom worked part-time as a real estate agent. Nah. I worked because I wanted to be anywhere but home. The guys on the site became more of a family to me than my actual family. They taught me everything, how to read blueprints, how to operate machinery, how to tell when someone's trying to cut corners that could get people killed. Most importantly, they taught me what it means to have someone's back. I moved out the day after high school graduation. Got a full-time position with the construction company I'd been working summers for, rented a tiny studio apartment that barely fit a bed and a mini fridge. My parents barely noticed, they were too busy planning Madison's Sweet 16 party, which, by the way, cost more than my first year's rent. The next few years, I busted my ass learning everything I could about construction. Started as a laborer, moved up to carpenter's assistant, then carpenter, then lead carpenter. By 25, I was running my own crew. The guys respected me because they knew I'd done every job I was asking them to do. I wasn't some college boy with a clipboard telling them how to work, I was right there in the trenches with them, getting just as dirty, lifting just as heavy. Meanwhile, Madison went off to some expensive private college, guess who paid for that, changed her major 3 times, and finally settled on communications or marketing or some other degree. Every time she came home, it was like the second coming of Christ. Mom would cook these elaborate meals, Dad would clear his schedule to spend quality time with her. Me? I got a text on my birthday if they remembered. But you know what? All that made me stronger. Every ignored achievement, every missed match, every time they chose her over me, it all just fueled the fire. I turned that anger into gains at the gym, into focus at work, into drive to succeed despite them, not because of them. By the time everything went sideways with my health, I was benching 315 for reps, deadlifting 500, and running crews that finished projects ahead of schedule and under budget. I'd worked my way up to site supervisor at one of the biggest construction companies in the area, had my own apartment, nothing fancy, but it was mine. Was even thinking about maybe starting my own business down the line. Then life decided to remind me it's got a mean right hook. It started with this weird pain in my chest, not like heartburn or muscle strain, this was different. At first, I brushed it off. You work construction long enough, random aches and pains become like background noise. Plus, I was that typical meathead who thought being tough meant ignoring when your body's trying to tell you something's wrong. Stupid, looking back on it. The real wake-up call came during a deadlift session. I was going for a new PR, 525. Everything felt solid during warm-ups, but as soon as I started pulling that weight, it felt like someone had wrapped a steel band around my chest and was tightening it with every breath. Had to bail on the lift. Me, the guy who once finished a wrestling match with a dislocated shoulder, had to drop the bar and sit down because I couldn't breathe. My buddy Mark from the crew, same guy who taught me everything I know about concrete work, practically dragged my stubborn ass to the thought it was just going to be some pulled muscle or maybe a pinched nerve. Nope. After what felt like a million tests and scans, Doc comes in with that look on their face. You know the one, where they're trying to stay professional but you can tell they're about to drop a bomb on you. Turns out I had this tumor pressing against my lung. Not the kind they can just cut out and be done with it either. We're talking major surgery followed by treatments that sounded like they came straight out of a sci-fi movie. The kind of thing that makes you realize all those hours in the gym, all that protein powder and creatine don't mean jack when your own body decides to turn against you. But here's the real kicker, the cost. Remember how I mentioned I was doing well at work?
Yeah.
Well, construction companies aren't exactly known for their amazing benefits packages. No health insurance, and being the young invincible dumbass I was, I hadn't bothered getting private coverage. Why waste money on insurance when I could spend it on supplements and new lifting gear, right? God, I was so stupid. The numbers the hospital threw at me might as well have been in Monopoly money. Surgery alone was going to cost more than I made in 2 years. Then add in all the treatments, medications with names I couldn't even pronounce, follow-up care, we're talking enough money to buy a house in some states. And they wanted it up front, or at least proof I could pay. I tried everything I could think of. First called every insurance company, but pre-existing conditions were still a thing back then. Looked into medical trials, but none were accepting new patients. Even checked out those medical tourism websites about getting treatment in Mexico or India, but the doctor shot that down real quick. Said I needed to start treatment like yesterday. My crew, man, those guys were amazing. Mark started a GoFundMe right away. The other guys were offering to donate vacation days, sick leave, whatever they could. Even the old-timer who'd been busting my balls since day one about being too pretty for construction, 'cause I actually wore sunscreen, came by with an envelope full of cash he'd been saving for a new Harley. But it wasn't enough. Not even close. The numbers were just too big, we're talking 6 figures here, and time wasn't on my side. Every day I waited, this thing in my chest was growing, making it harder to breathe, harder to work, harder to even get through a normal day without feeling like I was drowning on dry land. Lost 15 pounds in the first month just from stress and not being able to eat right. That's when I made the hardest decision of my life. After years of being the independent one, the one who never needed help, the one who'd built everything from scratch, I had to swallow my pride and go ask my parents for help. They weren't rich, but they had savings, good credit, a paid-off house. Plus, you know, they were my parents, the people who are supposed to have your back when shit hits the fan. It was a Tuesday evening when I drove to their house. Remember that clearly 'cause I'd just gotten my latest test results that morning, and the doc was pushing hard for us to schedule the surgery ASAP. I'd lost another 10 pounds that month, my work jeans were hanging off me like I was some teenager trying to look cool. Chest pain was getting worse to the point where I had to take breaks walking up a single flight of stairs. Their house looked exactly the same as it always had. Real estate prices in their neighborhood had doubled since they bought the place, they were sitting on at least $500,000 in equity alone. I sat down in the chair across from them, trying to ignore how my chest felt like it was in a vice grip. Started explaining everything, the diagnosis, the timeline, the costs. Showed them all the paperwork from the hospital, the treatment plans, everything. Even had a letter from my doctor explaining how urgent this was. My hands were shaking the whole time, but not from the illness. It was the hardest thing I'd ever done, asking them for help. You know what they did while I was laying all this out? Mom kept glancing at her phone like she was waiting for a more important call. Dad just sat there with his arms crossed, that same look on his face he used to get when I'd tell him about my wrestling matches, like he was tolerating an annoying sales pitch. When I finally finished talking, there was this long silence. The kind that makes your skin crawl. Then Mom and Dad did this thing they always did, this little look between them like they were having a whole conversation without words. Finally, Dad cleared his throat and dropped the bomb, "We can't help you with that. We've already committed our savings to Madison's wedding." I thought I'd misheard him at first, like maybe the tumor had spread to my brain or something. But nope, he just sat there looking at me like he'd told me they couldn't lend me $20 for gas. The wedding? I remember my voice cracking, not from emotion but from straight-up disbelief. Mom jumped in then, all smooth and calm like she was explaining something to a child. "It's not just a party, Jake. This is Madison's special day. We've already put down non-refundable deposits." The venue alone was $30,000. $30,000 for a venue. Meanwhile, I'm sitting there literally dying, needing surgery that could save my life, and they're worried about their precious Madison's Instagram perfect wedding. I could die without this surgery, I said it slow, making sure they understood exactly what they were doing. This isn't me asking for help buying a car or starting a business. This is life or death. Dad actually had the balls to shrug, like he was dismissing a waiter who'd brought him the wrong appetizer. "You've always been resourceful. You'll figure something out. This is Madison's time. We can't let her down." That's when it hit me. All those years of being the forgotten son, all those missed events, all those times they chose her over me, it wasn't just them being busy or distracted. They genuinely valued her happiness over my life. Their son could literally die, and they were more concerned about their daughter having perfect wedding photos. I got up to leave, my legs barely holding me up. Mom actually had the nerve to say, "Don't be dramatic. There must be some payment plan you can work out with the hospital." Like I was buying a dishwasher or something. The last thing I remember before walking out was looking at that wall of Madison's photos, all those smiling faces, all that money spent making sure their precious daughter had everything perfect. And there I was, their son, walking out of their house knowing I meant less to them than a party. That was the last time I spoke to them for almost 5 years. Update 1: The hardest battles often come with unexpected victories, but first you have to survive them. I learned this lying in the ICU after my surgery, watching the sun rise and set through a narrow hospital window while machines monitored every breath. Those first few days were a blur of pain medication, vital sign checks, and the constant worry that each breath might be my last. Mark, my concrete mentor turned guardian angel, practically lived in that tiny ICU room. He'd work his night shift supervising the crew, then come straight to the hospital, still in his dusty work boots. The nurses tried to enforce visiting hours exactly once. One look at Mark's expression, and they decided some rules were meant to be bent. Recovery wasn't the Hollywood montage I'd imagined. Every milestone was a war. First battle? Sitting up without help. Took 3 days. Walking to the bathroom? A week. Each step felt like I was dragging lead weights. Lost almost 40 pounds of muscle mass, looked like a completely different person in the mirror. The crew set up what they jokingly called Operation Keep Jake Alive. Created this whole rotation system, someone always checking in, bringing food, or just sitting there talking about job site gossip to keep my mind off the pain. Big Pete, our resident concrete specialist, actually went to cooking classes. Said he got tired of watching me choke down hospital food. Started bringing these protein-packed meals perfectly portioned for someone recovering from major surgery. Miguel, our master carpenter, would come by after his shifts with his laptop, teaching me about project management software and estimation tools. Can't lift steel beams anymore? Fine. Learn to tell others where to put them. His English wasn't perfect, but his wisdom was. The first month at home was the hardest. Simple tasks became mountains to climb. Showering left me exhausted. Getting dressed was a 20-minute ordeal. The crew turned my small apartment into what they called Rehabilitation Command Center. Installed grab bars everywhere, rearranged furniture to create clear pathways, even built a custom ramp for the 2 steps leading to my front door. Every crew member had their role. Old Tom, our equipment operator, handled transportation, drove me to every doctor's appointment in his meticulously maintained pickup truck. Said he couldn't trust my recovery to some random Uber driver. Rodriguez, our youngest carpenter, became my unofficial physical therapist. Guy was studying kinesiology at night school, used me as his practice subject. Designed this whole progression of exercises specifically for someone recovering from thoracic surgery. The first real milestone came 3 months post-surgery. Finally managed to climb a full flight of stairs without stopping. The crew had secretly gathered at the top, turned it into an impromptu celebration. Someone had even brought a cake with "Congratulations on not dying" written in wobbly orange frosting. I sat on the top step crying like a baby, though I told them it was just sweat. They pretended to believe me. What really saved me, though, wasn't just the physical recovery. Having to step back from the heavy lifting forced me to develop other skills. Started learning the business side of things, contracts, project management, client relations. Mark kept me involved by having me review bids and proposals, saying he needed my young eyes to check the numbers. Pretty sure he was just trying to keep my brain occupied, but it worked. Learn to see construction from a completely different angle. When you can't physically do the work, you start noticing things you missed before. How different teams interact, where time gets wasted, how to streamline processes. Started developing new methods for project coordination, wrote detailed guides for our safety procedures. The guys joked that getting sick had turned me into a professor, but they used my systems. That's when life threw me an unexpected curveball, but this time, a good one. The CEO who'd helped fund my surgery called me in for what I thought was a routine checkup. His office was everything you'd expect from someone running a major construction materials company: floor-to-ceiling windows, impressive city view, modern art that probably cost more than my annual salary. He didn't waste time with small talk. "We've been watching how you handled everything during your recovery," he said, sliding a folder across his desk. "The crew coordination, the new safety protocols, the efficiency improvements. We need people who understand construction from the ground up. People who've actually done the work, not just read about it in books." Inside the folder was a job offer, project manager position in their commercial division. Full benefits, including health insurance that would actually cover more than a Band-Aid. Base salary nearly double what I was making. The irony wasn't lost on me, almost dying had somehow opened the door to a better life. For the next 2 years, I threw myself into commercial construction management. Started specializing in medical facilities, something about knowing both sides of that coin just clicked. Learned everything I could about hospital design, medical equipment requirements, sterile environment maintenance. My experience as a patient gave me insights that other project managers missed. My first major project was a small outpatient clinic. Nothing fancy, but I knew every angle of it, from the patient flow patterns to the optimal placement of support beams. Found ways to improve the design that saved both money and improved functionality. The client was impressed enough to recommend us for bigger projects. Started building a reputation in the medical construction field. Other project managers would look at blueprints and see just another building. I saw every anxiety-filled walk to the treatment room, every worried family member in the waiting area, every nurse trying to maneuver equipment through crowded hallways. Started implementing design features specifically for cancer patients: wider corridors, better lighting, more natural views. The hospitals noticed. Then came the industry conference that changed everything. I was scheduled to present our approach to medical facility construction, nothing too exciting, just a standard PowerPoint about cost efficiency and patient comfort integration. That's when I noticed her in the front row. Most people zone out when you start talking about load-bearing calculations, but she was actually taking notes, asking detailed questions about structural integrity and electrical system integration. Grace ran her own electrical contracting company, specializing in medical facility systems. After my presentation, she completely dismantled my electrical layout design over coffee, then proceeded to redesign it on a napkin, making it 30% more efficient. I still have that napkin framed in my office. She understood things about construction that most contractors missed, the human element behind every technical specification. Our first date was at a job site, her idea. Spent 3 hours discussing optimal HVAC placement for operating rooms while walking through the skeleton of a new surgical center. Most people would find it boring, but watching her light up while explaining emergency backup systems and power distribution was somehow more engaging than any dinner conversation I'd ever had. She had this way of seeing through problems, finding solutions that nobody else considered. When I told her about my surgery, about my parents choosing a wedding over their son's life, she didn't offer empty sympathy. Instead, she showed me how we could use that experience to make hospitals better, more humane. Our relationship developed alongside our professional collaboration. Started small, consulting on each other's projects, comparing notes on industry trends. Grace's electrical expertise complemented my structural background perfectly. We began pitching for larger projects together, our combined approach winning contracts that neither of us could have secured alone. Within a year, we'd become the go-to team for complex medical facility projects. Developed a reputation for innovative solutions that didn't just meet specifications but actually improved patient care. Grace's power distribution systems were revolutionary, reducing emergency response times by crucial seconds. My structural designs incorporated features that made buildings more accommodating for both patients and staff. We got married in a small ceremony at one of our completed projects, a rooftop garden we designed for patient recovery. Just the crew, some industry friends, and her family. Mark was my best man, gave a speech that had everyone alternating between laughter and tears. Big Pete handled the catering, Guy had really gotten into his cooking. The crew, my real family, celebrated like they'd won the lottery. Success kept building. The small outpatient clinic led to larger hospitals, then to major medical centers. Each project got bigger, more complex. Started winning industry awards, getting featured in construction magazines. But what really mattered was knowing we were creating spaces that would help people heal. Then came the news that shook everything up. It started as whispers in industry channels, rumors about a massive real estate investment scheme gone wrong. Names were being tossed around, including my father's. At first, I ignored it, their world wasn't my concern anymore. But the rumors got louder, more specific. A group of country club members had pooled millions into what they thought was a guaranteed investment. Then came the phone call. I was in my office, reviewing plans for our biggest project yet, a $50 million medical center expansion, when my mother's number flashed on my screen. Hadn't seen that number in 5 years. Her voice was small, desperate. "Jake, we need to talk. It's important." The story came out in fragments. Dad had gotten involved in what he thought was a guaranteed investment opportunity through his country club connections. They'd mortgaged the house, emptied their retirement accounts, even taken out additional loans. Now the whole scheme was collapsing, and the FBI was investigating. Their entire social circle was imploding as millions in investments vanished overnight. But here's the real kicker, they'd already tried Madison first. Showed up at her gated community house with their suitcases, expecting their golden child to take them in. Instead, her corporate lawyer husband met them at the door with a business card for a bankruptcy attorney and some speech about not letting their financial problems affect the grandchildren's future. The same daughter they'd chosen over my life couldn't spare a couch for them to sleep on. "We need $50,000, my mother whispered. Just to catch up on the mortgage and stop the foreclosure. Please, Jake. We don't have anyone else to turn to." $50,000. Less than what they'd spent on Madison's wedding photographer. I looked around my corner office, at the awards on the wall, the framed photos of hospitals we'd built, the napkin with Grace's first electrical design. "Tell me something," I said. When Madison's husband handed you that bankruptcy attorney's card, how did it feel? To be treated like you didn't matter? The silence on the other end was deafening. Jake, please, my father's voice now, trying to sound authoritative but failing. We're family. No, I said quietly. Family helps family. The guys who sat with me through chemo? That's family. The ones who worked double shifts to help cover my medical bills? That's family. You're just people I used to know. Last week, they lost the house. They're living in some extended stay motel now, trying to figure out their next move. Their country club membership is gone, their social circle has evaporated, and their perfect daughter won't take their calls. Meanwhile, I'm breaking ground on the new medical center next month. Grace and I are expecting our first child. The crew, my real family, is already arguing over who gets to be the godfather. Mark insists it's his right as best man, but Big Pete's making a strong case with his homemade baby food recipes. Sometimes life has a way of showing you exactly who matters. And sometimes, it takes losing everything to learn that lesson. As for me, I've got everything I need, a job that helps people, a wife who understands me, and a family that shows me when my own flesh and blood wouldn't.